It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Jerusalem. Our top story. Protest and pressure on the streets of Israel as forces inside and outside the country demand its prime minister makes a deal. And the destruction in Gaza and bring the hostages home. The message from the protesters and President Biden, who says Israel's leader could do more. The British government adds to the pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu, announcing some arms exports will be halted, but he remains defiant tonight.
Also on Sky News at 10, married to a Conservative councillor guilty of inciting racial hatred during the riots. Her husband, though, says she was simply an upset housewife.
She's not that person. She's probably the opposite to that, actually.
No game, we see why militarization and love of the motherland is on Russia's school curriculum this year. And still casting a spell despite his brief break from the theatre, we hear from Sir Ian McKellen on a possible return to The Lord of the Rings.
I'm told Gandalf's involved, but I'm not yet told how much he's going to be paid or how much he's going to say, so I think we'll leave it there.
And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening from Jerusalem. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted tonight he would, quote, would not, quote, surrender to this pressure after a day when it certainly seemed nearly unbearable at home and abroad. Inside Israel, thousands of people blocked roads as they took part in a general strike, aiming to force Mr Netanyahu to do a deal to bring hostages held in Gaza home. Outside, President Biden said he wasn't doing enough to make that deal happen. And for the UK, the Labour government announced it was suspending the licences for some arms sales to Israel. Our first report tonight comes from the streets of Tel Aviv and our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkall.
In Tel Aviv, the day started in the way it finished the night before. Protesters shouting for a hostage deal and the resignation of Benjamin Netanyahu. The country's largest public sector union had called a rare general strike to bring the country to a halt.
If the general strike doesn't persuade the government to do a deal, then what?
Then what? Then there is going to be a civil revolution, like the Bastille.
As serious as that?
Yes.
We will not stop until they're all back home. We will not stop.
And what if this isn't enough to change their mind? What then?
We will do everything we can to get them back home.
There was the occasional moment of tension. We watched as a woman was bundled into a police van, briefly breaking free, her face full of anger.
The police are trying to keep Israel's roads open. This is the main junction, but the protesters keep coming back in and blocking it. And the police here have now lined up to try and push everybody back. But at the moment, they're losing the battle. And the protesters are successfully bringing the centre of Tel Aviv to a halt.
At the National Cemetery on Mount Herzl in Jerusalem, Hirsch Goldberg Polin was buried. With determined and tireless composure, his parents, John and Rachel, had become well-known faces as they campaigned around the world for his release. Hundreds gathered at the cemetery to help a mother and father say a final goodbye to a son they lost 332 days ago.
Hirsch, for all these months, I have been in such torment and worry about you for every single millisecond of every single day. We became absolutely certain that you were coming home to us alive. But it was not to be.
This evening, under growing pressure, Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the country, but gave no hint of changing course. He was defiant and uncompromising.
I know that if we leave, we probably won't be able to return for 47 years. We left and we couldn't return for 20 years. And after we sacrificed and fought, now we have them by their necks. We have caught them by their throats, and this could bring back the hostages.
As Netanyahu was speaking, Tel Aviv came alive with the noise of protest once again. They didn't hear from him what they wanted to hear. But they feel they have momentum now, perhaps for the first time in many months. Alistair, Bunkall, Sky News in Tel Aviv.
Well, as we've been reporting, the backdrop to the protests of the last 2 days has, of course, been the deaths of those 6 hostages in Gaza last week. Hamas burst through defences in southern Israel on October the 7th last year. They killed around 1,200 people and took more than 250 hostages. More than 100 were freed during a ceasefire in November. Some of those released include Noam Or, Gali Tarashanksi, Ofer Engel and Yafa Ada. But many of those taken by Hamas have been killed, including those 6 hostages who were confirmed dead after their bodies were found by the Israeli military in Gaza over the weekend. Israel now believes 101 remain in captivity, including 35 who are thought to be dead. Among those still being held are Eli Sharabi, Gali Berman, Liri Albag, Nama Levy and many others. Diplomatic efforts are continuing to reach an agreement over a lasting ceasefire in Gaza, but the Israeli government has faced some tough words and actions from its allies, as our diplomatic editor Dominic Waghorn now reports.
What looks like an earthquake is yet more man-made devastation in Gaza. Moments ago, a school stood here, flattened by an Israeli airstrike, killing at least 11. They fight to save those trapped under the collapsed building, plucking one survivor from the rubble. Today, a rare and significant rebuke from one of Israel's closest allies over Gaza, moved by the plight of Palestinians there, but also escalating Israeli military action in the West Bank. Britain is suspending some arms sales to Israel.
There does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law.
And across the Atlantic, America is losing patience too. US President Joe Biden unequivocal in his current assessment of Israel's Prime Minister and his attitude to a ceasefire.
Mr. President, do you think it's time for Prime Minister Netanyahu to do more on this issue? Do you think he's doing enough?
No.
There is still no sign of progress from either the Israeli leader or Hamas to strike a deal to end the misery of civilians in Gaza and bring the hostages home. One former peace negotiator and now aid worker says that is a disaster for everybody.
When we did the Oslo Agreement in 1993, we had rational leaders, I think, on both sides. There is no rationality in the Israeli leadership, and there is no rationality now in the Palestinian militant leadership. And that is such a catastrophe for the civilian population.
Frustration amongst Israel's allies is undoubtedly mounting and now having consequences, but there is little sign of progress towards a ceasefire or an end to the suffering. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
So the big question tonight is, how significant is the challenge to Benjamin Netanyahu this evening? I'll put that to our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkall, who has been in Tel Aviv following all of the developments, in a moment. But first to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is at the Foreign Office for us in London this evening. And John, I mean, we heard from the Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who talked about the banning of some arms sales to Israel, 30 out of 350. It does feel symbolic, but it is significant.
It's caused a row. He's gone further and done things that the previous Conservative government hadn't done. But at the same time, he did tell MPs in his statement that I've not gone as far as Margaret Thatcher went in 1982. Governments of both types, including Vince Cable, a Liberal Democrat in the coalition, and Gordon Brown, a previous Labour Prime Minister, have taken similar action, he said. But The Conservatives have bitterly attacked the move. Senior Tories who served in the previous Conservative government basically saying it's a gesture, a sop to Labour left-wingers. Andrew Mitchell, the shadow Foreign Secretary, who of course was Foreign Office Minister previously, said that it's something designed to satisfy Labour's backbenchers. Robert Jenrick, a candidate for the Tory leadership, said it was a shameful gesture to appease the hard left. Mr Lammy did say, in answer to one Conservative MP, it's something he regretted having to do. He's done it in sorrow rather than in anger. But if he was trying to appease the hard left, well, that hasn't worked, because they have been saying to Mr Lammy he should go much further. This is not enough. It should be a complete arms ban, some Labour left-wingers were saying. So, internationally, obviously, it'll be criticised. It's faced bitter criticism here, with the Tories saying it's shameful and Labour left-wingers saying doesn't go far enough.
John, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Let's bring in our Ali Bunkall now, who has been following developments in Tel Aviv. And Ali, this evening we heard from Benjamin Netanyahu. We saw that in your piece a little earlier on the programme. He remained defiant. He was digging in. He asked for forgiveness, but at the same time, he said that he wasn't going to end this war until Hamas was destroyed.
Benjamin Netanyahu has given very few interviews to Israeli media since October the 7th. He's held, I think, only one press conference in the last 11 months. The fact that he did so tonight and took questions from journalists is an indication of the pressure that has been on him over the last 2 days. He sought to try and explain his position. He sought to try and convince people that he has made compromises and that his insistence on the Israeli military staying in Gaza was for the good of Israel, its present and its future. But I think he left journalists there sceptical, and he left the crowds that were here in Tel Aviv listening to it angry that he wasn't going to move. And he will have left mediators unsure where this goes from here. Netanyahu has made it clear he has drawn his lines, and the protesters over the last 2 days have drawn their lines. We'll see where it goes from now.
Yeah, that is the big question, Ali. Thank you so much. And as Ali was saying there, it's difficult to know now where things will go next. We've seen mass demonstrations in this country for the last 24 hours, the biggest demonstrations we've seen, frankly, all year, as well as a general strike for half the day. Benjamin Netanyahu coming out defiant. We'll have to wait and see how the next 24 hours develop. But for now, back to you in London, Anna.
Yalda, thank you. Now, Elon Musk may not approve, but the determination of the criminal justice system to hold people accountable for what they said on social media during the rioting last month was never more apparent than today. Lucy Connolly, the wife of a Conservative councillor, pled guilty in court to inciting racial hatred. Despite her admission, her husband said she was no racist, but rather an upset housewife. Becky Cottrell spoke to him outside court.
Rioters attacked this hotel because it housed asylum seekers. A terrifying and racist response to misinformation spread online after 3 children were murdered in Southport. Lucy Connolly didn't take part in the violence, but she did take to social media, angered by false reports the killer was a Muslim asylum seeker. She posted, "Mass deportations now. Set fire to all the hotels full of the for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it." Her husband is a Conservative councillor in Northamptonshire. He defended her outside court.
It's just a moment of, an upset housewife, really. Just seeing children and the reports with all the misinformation, and just got dragged into it. And obviously she regrets it.
As politicians returned to the House of Commons, the Deputy Prime Minister condemned the disorder and discrimination.
This targeting of Muslims shows that we need to go further and faster in tackling this vile hatred, and it was fuelled by fake news. Last month's appalling violence exposed deep-rooted weaknesses in our society.
Lucy Connolly has apologised for what she wrote, but she told police she didn't like immigrants and claimed that children weren't safe because of them. Officers found racist posts on her social media months before the Southport attacks.
Does she accept that the tweet was racist?
I don't think she is not that person. I'm not too sure, really. I mean, all I know is she's not that person. She's probably the opposite to that, actually. She really is.
Mr Connolly is expecting his wife to receive a substantial custodial sentence. She faces a similar fate to many others, those who joined the violence and those who may have inspired it. Becky Cottrell, Sky News, Northampton Crown Court.
The frontrunner of the Conservative Party leadership told Sky News today that there's all to play for, as she insisted her party can win back power at the first attempt. Kemi Badenoch wasn't the only candidate launching today. Her colleague James Cleverly told our political editor that he was all about delivery, 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 and not part of what voters rejected at the election in July. Here's Beth Rigby's report.
Day one of a new political term, the summer election long forgotten by voters. But for a Conservative party still reeling from a catastrophic defeat, the search for a winning vision is on. At the Institute of Engineers in London, Kemi Badenoch pitching to rebuild a party razed to the ground. Do you accept that overturning Labour's 181 working majority will effectively be a two-term project, given you're in a worse spot than in 1997?
That's what people said about Labour in 2019. So there is all to play for. Politics is very different now. We live in a different age, and I am ready for a 2029 election, and I think that battle and that fight starts now.
You said there it was a worse defeat than 97.
Yeah.
You were out of power for 3 terms. There's no way you can win the next election, is there?
It'll be tough, but it's doable. Because actually one of the ways in which it's different from 97 is that Labour wasn't elected on a great wave of optimism and enthusiasm.
Given how annoyed voters were with the Conservative Party, isn't it sort of better for a period of silence?
Well, first of all, it's our duty as an opposition to hold the government to account, and in the last 2 months, the Labour government, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in particular, have made choices that are really bad for our country.
Just an hour later across Westminster, a competing leadership vision on display. This a slicker and more polished event for the former cabinet heavyweight James Cleverly, running on a ticket of unity and experience. As a former Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, Education Secretary and party chairman, for many voters, you are the very embodiment of what they have just rejected. Does that make you part of the problem, not the solution?
As I say, everyone running has been a minister in the Conservative government, and we will all have to stand by our record. My record has been delivery, 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 delivery.
Cleverly concentrating on detail while Badenoch big on vision. And while she pulled in MPs, his event was packed with party activists. There aren't many MPs here, but there's loads of party members. What's going on?
We're incredibly frustrated by the way the parliamentary party behaved. But there was one person, and many other good colleagues, but there was one man who was standing with his leader's rate in James, who wasn't stabbing people in the back, he wasn't squabbling.
The problem that people encountered on the doorstep was lack of unity, and his loyalty, is an example of that unity.
Summer well and truly over in Westminster. Now the Tories' long trudge into opposition years really begins. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
The government announced today that it is scrapping single word or phrase judgments by the school's inspector Ofsted in England. The Prime Minister said the decision made after head teacher Ruth Perry took her own life would help drive up standards. But parents we spoke to found the decision far from outstanding and instead perhaps inadequate or at least requiring improvement. Our correspondent Shimon Freeman-Powell has this report.
You like this?
Yeah. Kitting out the kids, preparing for the start of a new school year. But it comes as the government announces an end to the old school rating system, deciding to scrap the one-word Ofsted grade and provide parents with more detailed assessments.
As a parent, we've got a lot to already deal with, a lot to read. We already inspect the schools by talking to other parents. You already look at the area, you see from going on the buses what the children are like already. Detailed report, yes, some parents may be into that, but a lot of us come on now, it's too much paperwork already.
We purposely moved to Ealing because we were looking for outstanding school.
So that label was important for you and your family?
Yes, it was important.
When pupils return to school, those one-word ratings like outstanding or inadequate will no longer be used. Instead, schools will be assessed in 4 key areas, looking at the quality of education, behaviour and personal development, and assessing leadership performance.
Swimming? Wow. So is that you swimming?
And by the time kids head back to school next year, the government says parents will have access to new report cards, laying out what inspectors find in full.
This move today is about driving up standards, making sure that we've got a richer picture so parents can see in a more accountable way the real strength of a school and making sure we've got the improvements in to catch schools quickly.
Critics of the old rating say the one-word system wasn't helpful for parents and placed undue pressure on teachers. It was the death of head teacher Ruth Perry that caused the shake-up of the system. After a coroner ruled, an inadequate school rating contributed to her suicide.
The inspection, its conduct, the outcome, the likely consequences, the delay, the whole system was collectively the cause of Ruth's death. There was nothing else. The most visible feature of that fatally flawed system is no more. Thank goodness for that.
It's news welcomed by unions too, who have long called for reforms. And whilst the changes will apply to state schools immediately, it's expected that independent schools and colleges will follow. Shimon Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Well, it's not just back to school for pupils in England, Wales and Northern Ireland this week. Russian school children are also returning to the classroom. And the signs of the increasing militarization of their society are clear to see in the curriculum, as our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett reports.
To mark the new school year in Russia, children bring flowers for their teachers. And this year, they're getting something in return. It's a new subject on the security and defence of the motherland. They'll learn about combat drones, army rules, and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
You never know what kind of situation you might be in, so I welcome it.
It's great. Without basic military education, our children are not our children. This breeds patriotism.
In the Republic of Tuva, a lesson from Russia's leader called Conversations About Important Things. How much do you sleep to stay in such good condition? One boy asked. 6 hours, Vladimir Putin replied. A lighter moment among heavier topics like Ukraine's incursion in southern Russia, where many schools are closed.
Of course, our country and the armed forces will do everything to ensure normal life in these regions, and normal life for these children is restored. I'm sure this will happen, there's no doubt.
But that's not what it looks like. Over the weekend, a massive drone attack, with some reaching Moscow. And Ukrainian troops have held Russian territory for nearly a month now. For the past 2.5 years, the war has been a distant prospect for many Russians, with life here continuing as normal. But recent events have brought it much closer to home. The Kremlin, though, continues to downplay the threat. It doesn't want the public to panic, and it continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past. That includes rewriting history textbooks, which claim Russia didn't start the war. Why is there a need for new history books? History doesn't change, does it?
Well, yes, history doesn't change, but we need the truth. And we need history to be science, not to be ideology or propaganda.
Why then, during the chapter on the special military operation, is there no mention of the fact that Russia fired the first shot, that Russia invaded its neighbour? That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now read it carefully and you'll understand. Read it, okay?
For those who do, it's the latest glimpse into the Kremlin's alternate reality. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Ministers have promised a review into dynamic ticket pricing after the cost of tickets for the Oasis reunion tour more than doubled while fans waited in online queues. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has announced that so-called surge pricing will be included in a planned review of the secondary ticket sales market. A new winter vaccine is being offered to pregnant women, babies and the elderly on the NHS in England. Officials say the RSV jab will protect against lung infection and could prevent thousands of hospital admissions. Now, it was another successful day for Paralympics GB in Paris, kick-started by gold medals for Dave Ellis and Megan Richter in the triathlon. There was success in the pool too for Ellie Chalice and Louise Fidesz, while Stephen Maguire took gold in the men's boccia competition. Now, it is the start of a momentous week for survivors and the loved ones of those who died in the Grenfell Tower fire. More than 7 years on from the disaster, which killed 72 people, the official inquiry will publish its final report on Wednesday. And as they look for answers and accountability, the lives of those who called the tower block home are still scarred by trauma and loss. Sky's Rachel Venables has spoken to children who survived the fire, now calling for urgent action to ensure another Grenfell can never happen.
And where in the tower, where was your home?
So I lived at the back of the tower, just on this corner. Yeah, I remember in our living room, our window faced the park down there. And every time when my friends would be there, I'd shout their names from the window.
It's been more than 7 years since the children of Grenfell lost their homes, their neighbours, friends, family and childhood innocence.
You just think about, I feel guilty that I'm here living and doing all this stuff when obviously they didn't get a chance to, live and, do stuff that they wanted to do at such a young age.
After escaping down the smoke-filled steps, Luana, her sister and mum were in comas after the fire. Her unborn baby brother Logan didn't survive.
I actually wrote one right there for my brother.
Grenfell's youngest victim. After the fire, this specialist NHS mental health service was created, treating more than 1,000 children and young people already, with new referrals still piling in.
The fact that, we're 7.5 years on now and we still haven't had sort of the second inquiry report yet, that's just coming up, and there's still no decision around the tower and there hasn't been the criminal proceedings yet, that really has led to there being this sort of sense that this trauma is not over.
Abem is one of the many children they help. He lost his home and best friend that night.
His name was Isaac Paulos, and he did sadly pass away from the tower. Yeah, he was a really nice friend. He was my best friend from my school at the time. He was like my brother.
He has an important message to those in charge.
They need to remove the cladding of almost every UK building, because that cladding is deadly. It's when it comes to fire, it can destroy houses within minutes, within hours, like it did to Grenfell, spread really quickly. And I have for everyone, please remove it, please.
Their childhoods have been marked by a long wait for justice, and these young people just hope that this week's Grenfell inquiry final report can at last pave the way for answers and accountability. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
So Ian McKellen told Sky News today that he feels ashamed and emotional over the incident when he fell off a stage in London's West End. The 85-year-old actor says he's taking 3 months off from acting, but that he doesn't want to stop for any longer, as he's aware that there isn't much time left. A warning that this report from our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer contains flash photography.
He is one of our best and most beloved working actors. While legions of orcs can't stop Sir Ian McKellen, a fall from the stage whilst playing Shakespeare's Falstaff in June almost did, leaving the 85-year-old with a broken wrist and a chipped vertebrae.
There was such a hoo-ha in the press. It was as if I died and I was reading my own obituaries. I must say there's some very nice ones.
It's nice to know.
But it wasn't as bad as it sounded, and I felt ashamed of myself, and I felt I'd let the audience down, and I felt guilty. And when I've swept those out of the way, I'll get back to work. But in the meantime, I'm having a bit of a rest.
Has it changed your outlook on what you want to be doing next year?
No, I'm just aware there isn't much time left, and so I'm only giving myself 3 months off instead of 6 months.
Over the last 10 years, you've compared me to livestock, creatures of the sea, and an extinct bird. It's going to stop.
This film, The Critic, is the first we've seen of the star on screen since. In it, he plays a powerful London theatre critic in the 30s who lures a struggling actress played by Gemma Arterton into a blackmail scheme.
This is only the beginning.
It was an amazing cast in general, but, you know, everything just... Rarely do you get the opportunity to work with, you know, icons. So, I mean, he's an icon.
Get off the road! So a little break for now, but with news of new Lord of the Rings films in the works, fans wouldn't want to be without a certain wizard leader.
I'm told Gandalf's involved, but I'm not yet told how much he's going to be paid or how much he's going to say, so I think we'll leave it there.
Audiences no doubt delighted to hear he'll be back soon. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the chief political correspondent of The Sun, Jack Elsom, and the associate political editor of The New Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe. Welcome to both of you. Well, among the stories, we will be discussing this from the front of The Guardian. Its headline: the UK breaks with the United States to suspend 30 arms export licenses to Israel. That and plenty more, of course, when we come back. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he will not surrender to pressure over Gaza after the UK suspended around 30 arms exports licences to Israel. The wife of a Conservative councillor has pleaded guilty to stirring up racial hatred online following the Southport stabbings. And on the day MPs returned to Parliament following the summer recess, James Cleverly and Kemi Badenoch launched their bids to replace Rishi Sunak as Tory leader. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the chief political correspondent of The Sun, Jack Elsom, and the associate political editor of The New Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe. Great to see both of you. So as ever, let's check out the front pages for tomorrow's newspapers, starting with the Daily Mail, leading with a claim from the Conservatives that the Labour Party is running scared of a backlash over plans to strip winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. The Financial Times leads on the government announcing that it will suspend some arms export licences to Israel. That is also the lead story on the front cover of The Guardian, which says it's a break with the Biden administration's Israel policy. The Times also leading on the suspensions and how the move has been criticised by Israeli ministers and some Conservatives. The story also making the front cover of The Eye. UK restricts sale of weapons, it says. Telegraph has a story that car manufacturers are rationing the delivery of petrol cars in order to avoid net zero fines. The Tory leadership candidate, Kemi Badenoch, makes the front of the Express as she claims the Conservatives must return to traditional party values and stop acting like Labour. And it's Keir versus Oasis, according to the Mirror, as the Prime Minister proposes a clampdown on dynamic pricing following ticket sales for the band's reunion tour. While the Metro has a story on a missing student whose parents say they've been contacted by trolls looking to cash in on the disappearance. While the Daily Star leads on a claim by Jeremy Clarkson that one of the reasons the motoring show The Grand Tour is ending is because the world is becoming too dangerous for driving. Well, a quick reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for yourself while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Jack and to Rachel. Welcome to both of you. Many of the newspapers leading on the situation in Israel, but including what we heard from the Foreign Secretary today, which was that the UK is restricting the sale of weapons to Israel. 1% is what Britain exports to Israel, and it's about a tenth of that 1%, isn't it? Is this significant nonetheless?
Yeah, listen, it's a very significant step in the evolution of this war since October 7th, about a year ago. David Lammy's statement in the Commons this afternoon really caught a lot of people by surprise, even though we know that this has been under review for a couple of months since they won that election. As you said, it's not going to have massive ramifications in terms of Israel's arms imports. It's less than 1% Britain supplies to Israel. And like you said, it's only 30 shipments out of about 350 to do with stuff like drones and aircraft and helicopters, etc. What this will do, though, is really, I think, rupture relations, diplomatic relations with Israel, one of our closest allies. David Lammy's almost sensed that in the Commons. You got the sense he was almost falling over himself to say, I'm a champion of Israel, I'm a proud Zionist, and I, will always stand together with Israel. However, this has been received very badly in Tel Aviv. We've got the Minister, Israel Katz, saying it's problematic. It sends a problematic message to Hamas and Iran. It gives succour to those groups. And also, even in Westminster, you have figures in the Tory party and beyond saying this is a really bad decision, and the timing can be worse because it comes on the day where Israel are burying 6 hostages. So, it's a very thorny situation for the Foreign Secretary at the moment.
Which is exactly the point picked up by the shadow Foreign Secretary, Andrew Mitchell, announcing an arms embargo on the day when Israel is burying its murdered hostages, and within weeks of British military personnel and arms defending Israel from Iranian attack is not easy to swallow. Many of the front pages, including the Eye there, the FT as well, showing the enormous protests we've seen after the death of 6 hostages at the hands of Hamas, the pressure now on Benjamin Netanyahu from within Israel and indeed from Joe Biden, who said he believed they weren't doing enough to free the hostages. You know, is there a sense of a build-up, a tipping point, do you think, for the Israeli government on this, or will he hold firm?
Well, certainly Britain's decision to release this news today comes at one of the most emotive times because of all that pressure building, and the pressure building on Benjamin Netanyahu, essentially from all sides, including from within his country, his own people. The Israeli government were clear a year ago that there were two aims to what they were trying to achieve. One was to release the hostages, and two was to eliminate Hamas and make sure that Hamas couldn't regroup. And it's been very clear over the last year that the priority of the Israeli government has very much been on eliminating Hamas rather than on the hostages, even if it comes at the expense of their safety, which is why you're seeing those protests erupting across Israel today. In terms of the UK government response, this has been coming for a while. As Jack said, there have been noises all through the summer that David Lammy was considering this. Also, from a wider perspective beyond just the Foreign Office, Keir Starmer appointed as his Attorney General a barrister called Richard Hermer, who appointed him to the Lords, so not an MP, who has been an outspoken critic of the Israeli government even before October 7th, and what we've seen since then, somebody who has, for a number of occasions over their career, made a stand against the Israeli government and its occupation of Gaza. So it's not surprising that this is the direction the Starmer government is headed in. It's also not surprising that they're taking a very legalistic approach to this decision, stressing that it's a small number of arms licences. They're not saying that Israel has broken international law. What they're saying is that there is a risk that these weapons could be used for that, and that's why Britain is taking a step back. I think, though, the nuances of that decision may get lost in the wider discourse because it's such a divisive and toxic issue.
And there's so much reporting now. Israeli media reporting deep differences between Mr Netanyahu and top security officials, including his defence minister, Yoav Gallant. An official confirming a shouting match between Mr Gallant and Mr Netanyahu at a security cabinet meeting on Thursday, where Mr Netanyahu held a vote in favour of maintaining control of the Philadelphia corridor, the bit, bordering Gaza and Egypt. And it does appear that the Israeli Health Ministry have said post-mortem examinations have determined those hostages were shot at close range and died on Thursday or Friday. So the questions will linger over the prospect of a ceasefire and what happens next. Our coverage on that will certainly continue. In the meantime, let's go to domestic politics. Two of the Tory contenders launching today. First vote midweek. Where are we at?
It's really heating up now, this Tory, quite a protractive Tory leadership race. It's going to run all the way through to November. However, we're going to get sort of the real first flashpoint on Wednesday when we have the first MP knockout votes. So out of the 6 candidates, whoever has the least amount of Tory MPs on their ballot paper is going to be eliminated. So this week, coming out of the trap, we know they've been wanting to stand for a long time because they're on the ballot, but officially we had launches of James Cleverly and Kemi Badenoch today. Kemi Badenoch, I think, really now positioning herself as the standard bearer on the right. If you have a final 2 that go through to the party membership, you would think that you'd have one from the more centrist camp, maybe like a James Cleverly or a Tom Tugendhat, and then one from the right. And Kemi Badenoch is really pitching for those voters. And so today she gave this big speech in which she said that one of the problems of the last Tory government, why we lost, is that we said Conservative things, but actually in practice we did Labour things. And she didn't go into loads of specifics, but you can imagine that might be saying you were going to control immigration and then immigration going up, and saying you're going to cut taxes but then the tax burden going up to the highest in peacetime.
Or bailing people out on energy prices or indeed on COVID, which is big government, not small government.
A lot of spending, eye-watering levels of spending. And so I think she was really pitching to these Tory MPs today, saying that under her leadership, she will get back to proper, traditional, as they say, Conservative values. The problem is, obviously, is that she's been at the heart of government for the past few years, serving in the cabinet under Boris and Liz and Rishi, and therefore it's always difficult, isn't it? Because you want someone with experience, but if you just lost the big election, it's quite hard to try and extract yourself from what happened.
Yeah, to be fair, James, cleverly, a question was put to him too, and he said, look, we've all had cabinet experience, everybody who's standing. I got from her, I'm an engineer, I get things done, and I'm looking to the 2030s. That's sort of what I got from her. But anyway, who's going to be out is the, most likely bet on come Wednesday on this first vote.
Well, I don't think anyone expects Mel Stride to make it too far. Nothing against Mel Stride, but he's not someone who is talked about as a likely top two. But beyond that, it's really anyone's guess, because the Conservative Parliamentary Party is so small at the moment. They've got 121 MPs that a couple of moves one way or the other could prove pivotal. And we know that because of the way these contests work, with one candidate eliminated at a time, you can't really judge it on, in round one, this is how many votes someone got, because when someone's eliminated, their votes then go somewhere. So the order in which people get eliminated becomes quite pivotal. I think if you wanted to sort of game it out, you could have quite a lot of fun with, hang on, if this happens, then that. But all of them have difficulty with being tarnished by previous administrations. Priti Patel is the only one who didn't serve in with Rishi Sunak, but she obviously has baggage, as it were, with Boris Johnson. And so they're all trying to distance themselves from the administrations they served in that failed or that caused significant problems, but also say, look, I've got all this experience. Look at the good stuff I did. Don't look behind the curtain.
OK, sorry, got loads to pack in tonight. Your list is so long. I just want to very quickly reflect on...
a lot of news.
I know. The councillor's wife who admits a race hate post, expecting, we're told, a prison sentence over the Southport stabbings. Just a quick reflection on this one.
Yes, Lucy Connolly today in court pleaded guilty to stirring up racial hatred in the wake of the Southport killings. She posted on X, formerly Twitter, she called for hotels housing migrants to be set on fire and wrote, "If that makes me a racist, so be it." Her husband, who's a Tory councillor, came out after this guilty plea today and said that she expresses a lot of remorse, but the judge says that she can expect a lengthy custodial prison sentence. Now, while what she said was pretty clear-cut and being, pretty abhorrent and, at worst racist, I think that this will be quite controversial in terms of the actual decision to give her a custodial sentence, because depending on what should people now be sent to prison for what they write? Some people will say absolutely yes. There needs to be complete deterrence and unequivalence in terms of what you say, in terms of stirring up all these attacks. On the other hand, some people will say it was a moment of madness, as her husband is saying now. Should she really be thrown in jail for what she posted on Twitter? So it's very contentious.
She's calling for hotels that are housing vulnerable children to be set on fire. She's literally saying, set fire to the hotels. I think that's pretty clear-cut.
Yeah. No, completely. Okay. In terms of the language, it's clear-cut. Whether the sentence should be custodial, a lot of people are going to be critical of that. But
OK, sentencing coming up, I think October, they said, didn't they? Lots more still to come, including stuff we still haven't done. We will continue our press preview and discuss the Ofsted reforms that is in the Times. Back in a moment.
Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
You
take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account. I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families. But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics Correspondent at Sky News. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, the chief political correspondent of The Sun, Jack Elsom, and the associate political editor of The New Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe. Busy day for both of you. Parliament back for the first time after the summer. Daily Mail has the story about winter fuel payments, most pensioners losing that money, suggesting that Labour are now running scared, Rachel, on this.
Well, suggesting that some Labour MPs, increasing number of Labour MPs, are unhappy about this or are facing pressure about this because obviously they had the elation of winning the election. They went off on their summer recess, not on summer holidays, because they were working very hard, I'm sure. But the news that Rachel Reeves had taken a look under the bonnet of the economy and gone, oh, it's even worse than we expected. We've got to find money somewhere. Right, let's make winter fuel allowance not a universal benefit anymore, a benefit that only goes to the poorest. And that's just what we're going to do. You know, no questions, no answers. That's it. They've now had the summer to get letters from angry constituents, to think about, is this really a good look? Is this what they were voted in for after this sort of left-wing wave in the election? And this is pretty much, I'd say, business as usual, that new MPs get in full of hope and enthusiasm and then quickly run up against, yes, our government wants us to do that, our constituents want us to do that, the media wants us to do that. But I don't think there's any chance, really, of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves U-turning on this.
Well, see, I wondered if
the
sort of backlash about this and the pressure of elements of the budget that may materialise mean that she'll soften what she plans to do in the budget, so it doesn't seem quite as bad as people are predicting. But anyway, who knows? It's weeks away.
Yeah, and potentially the tax rises that we're hearing about, we are obviously going to get some tax rises. Maybe it won't be as painful as they're making out, so that the sort of backlash over the winter fuel payments doesn't reverberate even more. I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I know that a lot of new Labour MPs are getting their postbags absolutely full of angry constituents, mainly pensioners, completely incensed about this move because, unlike the two-child benefit cap, for example, which a lot of Labour MPs were angry about and obviously voted against, most of them held their nose and went through with it because actually it was a clear commitment which Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves went into the election saying that they weren't going to reverse it. The winter fuel payment, on the other hand, was like a complete bolt from the blue. There was no essential mandate for it. We didn't know that it was happening during the election campaign. Now, Labour will say, obviously, the state of the finances which they saw under the bonnet when they got in left them no choice. The problem now, I think, is that a lot of MPs are going to be really dialing up the pressure. And when they're back in Parliament, it really hits a way that doesn't materialise over recess. They're back, they're talking with each other, they're all thinking about what we're going to do. They're under pressure now.
OK, and just a final quick at our last story, which is goodbye to the words outstanding, good and inadequate on schooling. Now we're told by The Times that head teachers will get notice about Ofsted inspections. They'll be told on the Monday if inspectors are coming that week, designed to reduce stress on school staff. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. We'll talk about that and more in the 11. See you for that. Here's the weather. Well, it's looking quite unsettled this week, I'm afraid. Widespread showers, some more general heavy rain in the south on Thursday. There'll be a cooler, fresher start for most tomorrow, although still quite muggy in the southeast. There'll be just a few fog patches in the south, a scattering of showers for southern and western parts. Eastern England will be quite cloudy from around the Humber southwards through the morning, with some heavy showery outbreaks possible. Eastern Scotland, northern and western England and Wales can expect plenty of sunshine after early cloud clears the southwest. Well, all the top stories coming up for you in Sky News at 11. More on a defiant performance from Benjamin Netanyahu as he faces pressure at home and abroad over the prospect of a ceasefire for Gaza.